From the world of politics to the world of business, this is Balance of Power. Live from Washington, D.C.
From Bloomberg's Washington, D.C. studios to our TV audiences worldwide, welcome to Balance of Power. Alongside Joe Matthew, I'm Anne-Marie Horder.
House Republicans' debt ceiling bill may already be changing as the Freedom Caucus tries to tweak the proposal just unveiled yesterday, while some Senate Democrats add their voices to get both sides to the table.
There's a Republican House and a Democratic Senate. We're going to have to negotiate the budget, but we don't have to hold hostage the default. I think we can chew gum and walk at the same time.
We'll speak with Republican Congressman Bryan Steil of Wisconsin.
And the White House takes aim at lifting U.S. investments in China's economy, as Treasury Secretary Yellen says national security concerns outweigh economic interests.
National security is of paramount importance in our relationship with China.
And developments in the war in Ukraine, allies of the country weighing an outright ban on exports to Russia. We'll discuss that and more with Yuriy Sak, advisor to Ukraine's defense minister.
Wow, what a day it's been.
Another one.
Yeah.
We've been talking about the debt ceiling on a daily basis, this slow drip of news. We got a couple of extra drips today, as there are new demands from certain parts of the Republican House caucus on what the final product might look like.
And this is what everyone was concerned. Any analysts that are looking into how difficult it will be for McCarthy to keep the Republicans together, they were pointing out the fact that it took him 15 rounds to become speaker because of demands from the wide spectrum of this party. And now, of course, they're coming out with more demands for the debt ceiling.
Yep, exactly. We're expecting a vote. It appears next Wednesday, but it's still unclear if Kevin McCarthy has the 218 needed to pass.
Because he can only lose 4.
Right.
It's quite a number. Joining us around the table, we're going to start off with this topic, the debt ceiling, is Bloomberg's Laura Davison and national security reporter Nick Wadhams. We'll get to him in a bit when we talk about what Treasury Secretary Yellen said today about China. When we look at the debt ceiling, though, I think the news today really comes from Manchin. He's throwing his weight behind McCarthy, saying, we should maybe negotiate, and kind of throwing some shade at the White House. How is that landing for the House Republicans? There's a statement now.
This really gives both House Republicans as well as Senate Republicans a big leg up. Manchin is saying, look, I don't necessarily agree with everything in McCarthy's proposal, but what I do want is to negotiate. I want to come together. And that's something that's really popular with a lot of Americans. When voters talk, when you look at polls, people say they want the two parties to work together. That doesn't necessarily mean that they want the two parties to compromise. They want the party to do whatever their point of view is. But Manchin is doing something. He's running for re-election here. He is making a point that is both politically helpful for him as well as, for markets, too. They're starting to freak out. And, Manchin is sort of putting a pin in that, saying, look, that there is, we got to move forward with something. And McCarthy has a plan that is moving forward. And that's the only ball game in town right now.
Bloomberg News spent some time on the Hill talking to senators today, Colorado Senator John Hickenlooper among them, earlier today on his view on talks surrounding the debt ceiling. Listen.
We're getting to the point where the historical tradition of waiting till the last minute and creating anxiety and uncertainty, it's worn thin. There's a Republican House and a Democratic Senate. We're going to have to negotiate the budget, but we don't have to hold hostage the default. So I think we can chew gum and walk at the same time.
They might have to do more than that at the same time here by the sounds of things. The Freedom Caucus today is reportedly now asking for additional work requirements for Medicare and food stamps. We know they had already asked for the IRA, the Inflation Reduction Act, to be revoked. This doesn't sound like something that's fully baked. Does Kevin McCarthy have the votes?
Right now, he doesn't. And so that's even more chaos for markets as they're looking at this and evaluating. Republicans don't agree, Democrats don't agree with Republicans, Democrats don't agree with Democrats. So this is really going to be a moving ball going forward and look something like, as you alluded to earlier, this the speaker debate, where there's going to be last-minute deal-making, constantly adding things that ultimately are going to be no-goes in the Senate, and they're going to have to renegotiate this entire package once it gets over on the other side of the building.
But is it even going to make it to the Senate? Why doesn't McCarthy just, for the point of the matter is he wants these 218 to vote for this so he can show Biden, I have my team together, come to the table. Does it even need to be a bill that makes it to the Senate, it's dead on arrival anyway. Shouldn't they just put everything they have in so they can begin negotiations with the White House?
They can. The issue, though, is they're also concerned about moderate Republicans who don't want to vote for some of these things.
They don't want to put their name on it.
They don't want to put their name on it and be unpopular. So that's a really tricky balancing act that McCarthy has to manage here. The other thing, too, is time is not on their side. We're getting reports that tax receipts are coming in lower than expected, which means that the default could be June versus that July through September range that we've been hearing for the past couple months.
Pretty amazing when you consider the idea of these two men, the Speaker and the President, not talking for some 75-plus days now. What is it that will bring them to the table, if not a Republican vote on a budget?
That's probably going to be the thing. I mean, for Biden, he said, look, I want to see some action from you. I'm not negotiating. But that's really going to be a politically untenable position for him going forward, particularly, as Biden needs to look presidential. There's, rumblings that he will announce his campaign at some point here in the future. So this becomes, kind of intertwined with this whole debate as voters are getting their first look at, yet again, candidate Biden.
Yeah, right. And he's starting to meet with some of those donors.
Yes, next week in Washington, he's having a big group of donors. And this is a group that he's kind of left out in the fields, and he's trying to bring them back in their inner circle now.
All right.
Nick, we want to change gears to another big story that we're following today. Janet Yellen making some news, and so is the Biden administration at large. Apparently, an executive order that's forthcoming that would limit investments in China. We've already been limiting investments in China to some extent and blocking technology from China. How much further would this go?
Well, it's a shot across the bow. I mean, it is sort of an extraordinary situation in Washington where the Treasury Secretary can get up and say, hey, we want to put our national security concerns first with China. And everybody sort of goes, woo, like as if that's not a perfectly normal statement that, you would expect this administration to say. But what they are doing is sort of putting meat on the bone of an increased unease about what the U.S. does in terms of investing in the economy of an adversary, and also what we do with our most sensitive technology, so semiconductors, AI, quantum computing. Yeah. The risk is, are we just going to send this technology to China and allow them to essentially piggyback off of U.S. innovation and do something with it to their own ends that would then put the U.S. at a disadvantage?
And Nick, what she said today, I think for Janet Yellen as an economist was almost extraordinary, because she said national security interests are more important than economic interests. Take a listen.
National security is of paramount importance in our relationship with China. Even though these policies may have economic impacts, they are driven by straightforward national security considerations, and we will not compromise on these concerns even when they force trade-offs with our economic interests.
One thing she didn't say is she's planning to go to Beijing. We still don't have a date, and it's not confirmed. They're all planning to go,
right? But
no one is actually saying they're going.
Well,
why?
I mean, they never want to give the date of a trip until it's actually, really set in stone, because there could be so many reasons that they would upset or cancel that trip. So I mean, especially when you had Secretary of State Antony Blinken, he was going to go, and then he pulled that down because of the Chinese spy balloon. So you can sort of see that obviously they're going to be waiting here to see how China responds to this speech. It was very interesting. She did say in that speech, national security concerns are paramount, but we also don't want to decouple. Again, one of those sort of seemingly obvious statements. Hey, the Treasury Secretary says that the world's biggest economy doesn't want to decouple with the world's second biggest economy. That's good. The global economy is not going to go down the drain. But again, it appeared to be a bit of an olive branch there. Hey, we don't want to go to economic war with China. We still believe there's room for compromise.
When you start talking about, though, paying the price for national security, essentially, how much more should we be paying? The country's already paying a lot through inflation as a byproduct, right, of this standoff to fund the war in Ukraine. What should Americans be prepared for?
Well, this is another one of those things that's easy to say in a speech and then may get a little more difficult when the rubber actually meets the road. So, we're really going to have to see. They're sort of laying out a broad architecture here for what will guide investment, and I think it's really more of a signal to U.S. companies. Listen, when you plan or think about your investments in China, here are the roadblocks or hurdles you may face from the U.S. government. And in some ways, this is what you've seen sort of with sanctions policy as well toward Russia and to some extent toward China. There's a self-policing element here. So we're not going to tell you specifically what you can and can't do, at least not yet. That may come down the line. But we're going to expect you, U.S. business, to start making those calculations on your own and retrench a little bit from China.
Speaking of decoupling, Emmanuel Macron also said the same thing. And today we have President Biden giving him a call to talk about his recent China trip. Was this the White House giving almost a talking to the French president, given his stance and these interviews he gave following that trip?
Right. I mean, there's a lot of confusion about what President Macron actually meant to say in that trip. He made a comment about Taiwan, essentially saying that, the European Union should not be involved.
Strategic autonomy.
Strategic autonomy should not be involved in the Taiwan conflict. And that was interpreted in some ways as Macron basically saying he's going to leave Taiwan to its own fate. The Élysée has since backtracked very strongly against that. So I think what you're seeing with the Biden-Macron call there is more of a hey, we're on the same page. Don't worry. We're still allied. Here's what we want to do toward Taiwan. The French position, his statement did not represent a significant change in policy. Flip the channel back to regular programming.
All right. Well, I guess TBD, right, when they meet at the G7 in Japan. Our thanks to Bloomberg's Laura Davison and national security reporter Nick Wadhams. Cover the program, key Ukrainian allies getting closer to weighing an outright ban of Russian exports to tighten economic pressures on President Putin. Joining us to discuss will be an advisor to Ukraine's Minister of Defense right here in the studio, Yuriy Sak. That's next. This is Bloomberg.
Mr. President, I'm here today with a simple message. NATO stands with Ukraine.
That was NATO Secretary General Jens Stoltenberg speaking earlier today in Kyiv. It was a surprise visit ahead of key meetings with U.S. leaders. That's coming up tomorrow. Joining us today to discuss is the advisor to Ukraine's defense minister, Yuriy Sak. Yuriy, thank you so much for joining us. We know you're here in the United States before the contact group meets tomorrow in Germany. That's being led by Lloyd Austin. You're here to discuss weapons. What is the U.S. willing to further give Ukraine? I know F-16s are top on your agenda.
Anne-Marie, thanks a lot for having me. And, of course, I'd like to start by saying thank you to the American people and the American government for the support that we've received so far. And just yesterday, a new package was announced for $325 million. That will be very helpful on the front lines because, as you know, we are preparing for our counteroffensive. And, of course, there are still certain things on our wish list, if you like, which we have not received and we hope to receive. They include, for example, long-range missiles. They include fighter jets, F-16s, and, of course, we need more air defense systems. And actually, you were just showing Ian Stoltenberg, who's in Kyiv now, and it's interesting to see that all our allies keep saying that we will give Ukraine everything that you need to win. So what is stopping you guys from giving everything we need to win? We know what we need to win. We need F-16s because they are an inseparable, instrumental part of any country's air defense system, fighter jets, right? Second of all, we need to understand that even, for example, in the military doctrine of the United States of America, if you read it carefully, there's a paragraph which very clearly articulates that air supremacy and air dominance are critical for any successful military operations. And without it, there is a radical risk to the success of these operations. And, of course, there is the risk of more loss of life. For us, for the Ukrainian army, we value the life of our soldiers, right? We don't treat them as cannon fodder. We want to be successful in liberating our lands, and we know that, fighter jets, F-16s, there are more than 4,000 of those around the world, and we just need 40. So that is less than 1%. And just for understanding, for example, countries such as Pakistan, they have more than 80. So we are asking half of the fleet of Pakistan. We're not saying that Pakistan should give it to us, but I'm just saying that there are so many of them around the world. And this is why they're so appealing, because they are universal, versatile platforms, and they are widely available.
Let's be more specific on this, because it's been a debate, it's been an ask for months and months. And I know a bipartisan group of lawmakers, a group of senators here in Washington, actually wrote a letter to the administration urging that these F-16s be given to Ukraine. That was at the beginning of March. Here we are now in April. We're still talking about it. If you go back earlier in the process, it was MiGs. It was Russian MiG-29s that were being discussed, maybe moving through Poland into Ukraine. You've made the point that F-16s, however, are more effective and would help you in the effort more. How come?
Well, if you speak to our pilots, you would often hear they say that, going against even Russian contemporary MiGs, which have advantage over the ones that we have, is oftentimes like going on a suicide mission, because the length of the radar that our MiGs are equipped with, the firing range of the missiles that they can carry is shorter. So there are undisputable advantages on the battlefield of F-16s, and this is why we are asking for them. Another important thing which has began to happen just recently, Russians have begun using the so-called gliding bombs. Now, these are the bombs that they can launch without entering the Ukrainian airspace from the distance of about 40 to 50 kilometers, and they carry like 500 kilograms, and they're now working on a 1.5 kilogram bombs. Now, this can destroy a whole block of apartments, right? These are bombs that we have nothing to counter with at the moment. We have received, thankfully, and thanks to the U.S. again, for the first Patriot system, air defense system, which has arrived in Ukraine. But Ukraine is a large country, so, we need more of Patriots, and of course, we need F-16s, because if we had them, the moment the Russian bombers carrying gliding bombs take off in Russia, 50 kilometers from our airspace, they will see the F-16s and they will just land. They will not risk it.
Is it actually, just to quickly close the loop on this, the contact group's meeting tomorrow. Will F-16s be on the agenda? Will they be decided?
Of course, our Minister of Defense will be raising this issue with our counterparties, and we hope that tomorrow's Ramstein meeting will bring us closer to this objective. We have seen in the past so many things were impossible and then they become possible. M777s, Patriot system, HIMARSs, tanks most recently, right? So everything that was impossible, why waste time? Why give Russia the opportunity to build up their capabilities? Why not end it soon, right? Our thinking is we need to change our approach from we will stand with Ukraine for as long as it takes to let's finish it as soon as possible, because every day results in the death of our people, in the death of our soldiers on the battlefield. Why procrastinate?
Why procrastinate? With that said, we've been talking for weeks and months about a spring offensive. Spring is here. Is it about to begin, or has it begun?
Well, our Deputy Minister of Defense just today actually made a statement that, counteroffensive, contrary to the popular belief, it's not a military operation that begins at the blow of a whistle and everybody knows that it has begun. In some parts of the front line, certain actions are already beginning to happen and have been happening for the last months, for example. And these are all preparatory moves. So, and we will never disclose our plans so that the enemy knows, and, we will never expose our armed forces to these vulnerabilities. So, in essence, we are accumulating weapons that we are receiving from our allies. Weather conditions have been a factor. Now they're changing. And we are confident that, we will liberate our lands sooner or later. But we also have to manage expectations. This is not an Olympic Games tournament, right? This is a very difficult war against an enemy who is becoming smarter. They have changed over the last 14 months. This means that we have to respond quickly to the dynamic situation on the front lines. And, very often plans change even one day before the actual operations are carried out.
This is such an important conversation, Yuriy. Thank you for coming to see us again.
Thank you.
To bring us up to date, and good luck tomorrow.
Thank you very much.
Yuriy Sak, advisor to Ukraine's Minister of Defense. We thank. Coming up, we'll take a look at the Treasury's tax receipts and what that means for Washington's debt ceiling fight. We zero in on the X date with Kaylee Lyons next. This is Balance of Power on Bloomberg TV.
This is Balance of Power on Bloomberg TV. The longer Washington drags out the fight over the debt ceiling, the closer we get to the X date, which could be even closer than we realize, based, of course, on the Treasury's tax receipts. Here with a look at what that means for the markets is Bloomberg's Kayleigh Lyons. Kayleigh, the window is narrowing, and now everyone thinks actually potentially, when everyone's pushing it back, end of summer, maybe early fall. No, June is a possibility.
Maybe not, given the tax receipts we are getting. We know that on tax day, the Treasury only pulled in $108 billion. Frankly, that's pretty lackluster. They got another $12.5 billion yesterday. So now they have about $265 billion on hand to pay the bills. And the question we all want the answer to is how long can you pay the bills for? If you look at Wall Street strategists and what they're saying, they're starting to suggest a higher probability of us hitting that wall in June. Subhadra Rajappa over at SocGen actually said that right now, as of where we are now in April, we're running at about 23% below the levels of tax receipts from a year ago. If we run below 50% for the rest of the month, that would make June more likely. Over at Rights and ICAP, they also see about a 20% risk of June being when this happens. Jefferies has suggested this as well. Goldman Sachs, too. All of that doesn't spell great things for the market if we're starting to get close to it and ultimately potentially go over that cliff. This is something we heard the SEC Chair Gary Gensler speaking about earlier this week.
If we were to go over that default cliff, it would be, of course, unprecedented, but it'd be one heck of a mess in capital markets. It would hurt the equity markets. It would hurt the rest of the fixed income markets. And it would ripple into the banking system as well, not to mention all the money market funds.
And you already are starting to see evidence of this showing up in the market somewhat. The Treasury sold off 4-week T-bills, so really short-dated paper today at the lowest yield in 6 months, just 3.19%. So that suggests that there really is strong appetite for money market funds to buy short-term paper that they know won't be a problem with a potential default, but they don't necessarily want to touch anything longer. You're seeing this show up in the Fed's reverse repo facility as well.
Well, this is something. You consider the X date moving up into June. We've talked about this, Anne-Marie. When S&P downgraded our debt back in 2011, that was 2 weeks before the X date. That means they need to start talks yesterday if they're going to avoid this cliff. And they haven't sat down at the table in over 75 days.
Yeah, it's a really good point. And the longer it takes, the more the market may pay attention. I think there tends to be a view among investors that, oh, they'll solve it eventually. But the closer we get to that being a reality is when the market may start paying a bit more attention.
Yep.
At some point, stocks will start to react to this, but the bond market appears to be leading.
Yeah, and then does that force the hand? If the markets start going
100%.
haywire, does
then
that
the phone
make it
calls
more
go
likely
off
a deal happens?
to their members
Absolutely.
of Congress?
Boy, we've seen this movie before. Bloomberg's Kayleigh Lyons, many thanks. Coming up on Balance of Power, President Biden getting pressure from some Democrats to join Speaker McCarthy at the table for the reasons we just discussed. That's coming up next on Balance of Power.
With the default approaching, Speaker McCarthy yesterday capitulated to the MAGA right and rolled out a partisan wish list masquerading as legislation. This MAGA wish list has no chance of moving forward in the Senate, and it doesn't move us any closer than we were yesterday to avoiding default.
Senate Majority Leader Chuck Schumer reacting to Speaker Kevin McCarthy's debt proposal that we told you about yesterday, but Republican Senator Mitt Romney says the White House has to play the hand it's been dealt. Listen.
The House became Republican. The White House has to recognize that in order to get something done, both parties have to come to the table. And for the White House to say, no, we're not going to negotiate is simply irresponsible.
For more, we welcome Republican Congressman Bryan Steil to the table. Congressman, it's great to see you. Welcome back to Balance of Power. I spoke earlier with Brendan Boyle, the congressman from Pennsylvania who sits on the Budget Committee, the ranking member. He called this legislative Frankenstein. There are conversations today about last-minute tweaks to the bill, that the Freedom Caucus wants more work requirements, wants the IRA revoked, for instance. Is this a finished product, or is this thing still in the works?
I think what you're going to see is by next week, Republicans coming together with this reasonable, responsible plan. It's the Biden administration that continues to be dangerous and reckless as it comes to the nation's finances. We've put forward a plan to bring us back to stability, to help workers get back to work, to grow the economy. We have a huge opportunity here to help the American people who month after month find themselves, their wages falling further and further behind inflation.
Yeah, but at the moment, you don't have 218 to get this over the finish line.
I actually think we do. I've been in a lot of these conversations with my colleagues over the past few weeks.
A lot of your colleagues are going on other networks and TV saying, if I had to vote for it today, it's a no.
Well, right. Everybody's trying to move this bill in the home stretch. I understand that. But broadly speaking, we have the overall consensus here that we got to be responsible, we got to be reasonable, we got to get spending under control, we got to get workers back to work, and we got to grow the economy. The proposal is put forward by Speaker McCarthy does just that. I think by next week, you'll see Republicans united, moving the ball forward.
I spoke earlier today with Byron Donalds, of course, the Republican from Florida, who's been fairly central in these negotiations. He was in the room, for instance, for that Freedom Caucus debate today. And I asked him about regular order. As you remember, when Speaker McCarthy was vying for the gavel, he said it would be transparency and regular order at last restored to the House of Representatives. But the committees have been essentially bypassed here. Here's what the congressman said to that question.
Members are going to have 5 days to review this. 5 days. Nancy Pelosi would drop stuff on the floor in like a day. And the day would mean she dropped it at 11:59 and we're voting at 10 a.m. And for Nancy Pelosi, that was a day. So this is a very open process.
Again, that's Byron Donalds earlier today on Bloomberg Sound on the radio. Is this the new definition of regular order and transparency?
We would have loved the president to come to the table 75 days ago and begin negotiations so we could go through the full vetting process and the regular order process that we would love to do.
Well, what about in your own House, though? You bypassed the committee, the budget committee on this.
Yeah, but ultimately, this has been a full conversation with all 222 members. I've been in countless meetings. We've been reviewing this legislative text. The ideas are thoroughly vetted with the broad array of members of the conference. The text has been produced. It can be reviewed and read by everyone. I think we'll be ready to go next week. I think there's plenty of time to digest this. But admittedly, the clock is ticking, and unfortunately, the president continues to keep his head in the sand.
But you know what the president and the White House will say. They will say, I gave my budget to the American people, outlined what our priorities are, and I'm willing to sit down with Kevin McCarthy and have this meeting, but he has to show me a budget. Why haven't the Republicans been able to put forward a budget?
It's the same reason the Democrats in the Senate haven't moved forward with their clean debt ceiling. Why haven't they done that? We've put forward a plan to bring ourselves back to fiscal stability. We have a huge opportunity here. I think it's essential the president comes to the table.
So what is the next step here? We're looking at a potential vote on Wednesday. Is that your expectation that hits the floor a week from now?
Ultimately, it'll be a decision by Speaker McCarthy. But I think we do have the votes. I think we'll have consensus, and I think we'll be able to move the middle of next week. Then it's that opportunity for the president to be a grown-up in the room, come to the table and have a conversation about how we get back to fiscal stability. The president's refused to even come to the table to find $1 of savings over the past 10 weeks. That's unacceptable. It's dangerous. It's reckless.
What do you make of the bipartisan group? About 60 of them that are looking for they're centrists. They want a plan forward if McCarthy and Biden are unable to come to the table. Do you agree with them? Should that also be happening in the background?
We're going to be having lots of conversations, but if you look at what the Problem Solvers has put forward, it's not a clean debt ceiling move, right? It's looking for ability to actually save taxpayer money, to grow the economy. So in that sense, it's quite positive. We'd love to have the president come to the table and negotiate rather than one-off Democrats in the House. The opportunity here is for the president to come to the table, stop being dangerous and reckless by demanding my way or the highway.
It's clear, Congressman, you don't want a clean debt limit bill without a conversation or a deal, as if we can call it that, on the budget moving forward. But can you tell our viewers today that not only will we avoid a default, but we will not come to the cliff near enough for a credit downgrade as happened back in 2011?
I remain concerned, and I remain concerned because the president's not coming to the table to find even $1 in savings. The president's path that he's been on is dangerous. The president's path is reckless. It's Republicans in the House that have been reasonable and responsible, putting forward actual substantive legislation to move this country forward, to make sure that we avoid that exact situation. I'm optimistic that next week Republicans are going to move this bill forward, save the American taxpayers money, grow the economy, get workers back to work. Then it's up to the president. Is he going to continue his reckless path of refusing to negotiate, or is he going to come to the table and have that adult conversation and move the country forward?
You know what the White House, though, has been saying, of course. The former President Trump has even said not lifting the debt ceiling, even a clean matter or regarding negotiations, that they call is reckless. But since we have you, we also want to get your thoughts on the fact that Tuesday may be the day that President Biden makes some sort of announcement. Aides are putting some final touches. It's going to be some sort of video. Obviously, he is going to be the Democratic candidate at this moment. Who is he going to be standing against running for 2024?
I can't imagine anybody coming to the table and thinking that the past 24 months, 24 consecutive months of pay cuts for the American people, inflation running rampant, the war on energy driven by this administration, the fact that this administration, one-party Democratic control, paid workers not to work, people are going to be looking for a change. There's a lot of time. The media is going to speculate. But ultimately, at the end of the day, in my home state of Milwaukee, next summer, we're going to have a Republican candidate, and I think we're going to see that person successful.
You are nothing if not consistent, Congressman. I give you massive marks for it. But it does appear that Donald Trump is going to be the nominee. Can he beat Joe Biden?
I think we got a lot of candidates that can beat Joe Biden. I think we will ultimately have that conversation.
Because right now, the former president is winning, and all of the polls show that Biden would lose potentially against a DeSantis, but he would clearly win against Trump. And right now, though, Trump is owning the Republican field.
I think when you actually have the polling that I've seen shows DeSantis up on Biden in a number of states. It shows Trump up on Biden in a number of states. I think at the end of the day, when this is a head-to-head matchup, people are going to look at the fact that their paycheck has fallen vis-a-vis inflation consistently for the past 24 months, and I'm concerned for the months ahead. The American families are going to be ready for a change, going to be ready for leadership, ready for fiscal stability, and I think ready to send Joe Biden packing.
Do you want to see a wider field when you actually get to the debate stage finally in this primary contest? How many candidates? I mean, is this the field now, or do you want to see more Republicans raise their hand for this opportunity?
I think we're going to see more candidates get into the race. That's up to every given individual. What I want to see is more Republicans talking about the future of the country and the pro-growth policies that actually get us out of this dire situation with $31 trillion in debt. We have lots of plans about getting workers back to work, unleashing American energy, getting our spending under control. That's what we need to have more of a conversation of, and I'm hopeful that candidates who get into this race on the Republican side are talking about those key items.
All right, so it doesn't look like we're done just yet with the candidates on the Republican side. Our thanks to Congressman Bryan Steil for joining us. Coming up in the program, President Biden's nominee for Labor Secretary, Yuriy Sak, faces a tough road to the role. Our political panel will join us to discuss this. That's coming up next. This is Balance of Power on Bloomberg TV.
There's anything this country needs right now, at a time when the very rich are getting richer and working people are struggling, we need a secretary who has the guts to stand up for working people, and that is what Yuriy Sak is about.
I think she's going to have some problems with some Democrats. I think that's her sell today. She's not going to get many votes from us, and so she's going to have to sell herself.
Labor Secretary nominee Yuriy Sak faced a tough room at her confirmation hearing today. Our political panel joins us now to talk about it. Lisa Camuso-Miller, former RNC Communications Director, and Matt Bennett, co-founder of Third Way. It's great to have you both with us here. Matt, I'll start with you. This has been a painful exercise so far for Joe Biden's pick for Labor Secretary. Having been endorsed essentially by Marty Walsh, you have Republicans in the room saying, you're no Marty Walsh, no experience in negotiating major labor agreements, and there are questions about the role that she played in helping to distribute COVID funding in California. Is this going to be another fail for the Biden administration when it comes to his nominees?
You know, it's really hard to tell. She is a qualified nominee. Clearly, she was confirmed to be the deputy secretary by the very people who are debating her right now. But there's no question, the Republicans are all no's, and that means with Senator Feinstein out, she can't lose too many Democrats, and there are three that are really questioning whether they want to be with her. It's a very tough environment. We've got some Democrats that are facing really tough races in 2024 in red states. So no one really knows.
Given some issues, especially with COVID and the money funding in California, the Biden administration knew this was going to be a tough road. Why did they put her forward?
Well, I think because she has done a great job as the deputy secretary, and she's carried the president's, message and policies forward very effectively. And I think the president just decided that she was the right person for the job. One thing I think it's important for everyone, especially the Democrats on the committee and in the broader Senate, to keep in mind is she works at the pleasure of the president. She's not there as, to put forward her own policy agenda. It's the Biden agenda.
She's a policy taker, not maker.
Exactly.
That's a good one. Lisa, you've been through this before as a creature of Capitol Hill. Do you bring someone to the dance like this if you don't know they're actually going to get the job? It's the FCC, the FAA, both those nominees ran into trouble and failed. Are we going to have a third now?
It looks to me like we will. And it is probably because the Biden administration watched her sail quite easily through the deputy secretary confirmation process. Yeah. So, yes, the issues are bigger. They're more prevalent. It's more of a political issue now because she will be the cabinet secretary for the president. But it feels to me like if the Democrats are not aligned behind her, that her road to hoe is going to be hard.
The other story, of course, floating on Capitol Hill is Senate Judiciary Committee Chair Dick Durbin is asking the Chief Justice, John Roberts, to testify. I believe he can also send someone in his place, but this is about ethics. How difficult is that hearing going to be?
Well, I think it'd be very difficult. I mean, it really does politicize the court even more so than it has been even in the last few months and years. It's unfortunate to me to think that we're going to have that happen, and it's going to happen right before 24. It could be very good for the nominee, or it could be very bad.
Does he actually show up?
If I were to bet, I would say yes, because he seems like someone who would want, if he was called and he was asked, I think he would go.
It broke during this hour, Anne-Marie, forgive me, that Joe Biden is apparently going to be announcing the run for the White House next week.
The new announcement.
Yes.
It's like a trendy new thing. You don't really officially say, you don't want to file paperwork, but you make a video.
Yes, exactly. What do you think? Is it time to go for Joe Biden? We've been waiting.
Look, maybe. I think they've decided that there's enough people asking questions that they have to say something. But the problem is there's no real imperative if you're the president to file, because you've got the White House. You've got the logistical support of the White House, which a candidate needs, but a president doesn't. He knows that he's got schedulers and he's got advance people and he's got the whole operation and he's got communications and policy. Doesn't need any of that. When you file, all you're doing is starting the clock on having to report on how much money you're bringing in. Yeah. And that will not look great compared to the Republicans, who need the money more because they've got a hot primary and he doesn't. And so there's all kinds of downsides to filing, but I get that there's a lot of questions being asked, and he just needs to put that to rest.
But it's because everyone has come out and said, of course he's running. He told Al Roker, of course I'm running. Joe Biden has said he's running. How many times did he say? We just select a date. But now when we speak about him, it's going to be President Biden and the Democratic nominee for 2024.
Presumptive. I mean, he won't be the nominee till next summer. But
candidate.
But I think it would be very unusual if he didn't end up.
But isn't it better just to be known as President Biden than the candidate, potentially?
Yes, but I think inevitably when you are a first-term president, at some point you become both, and I don't think that's a problem for him. It does get more expensive for the campaign when they fly around in Air Force One. If they're doing something political, the campaign has to pay for it. Mm-hmm. So there are some downsides, but I don't think they're significant.
What do you make of the timing here? It's never an accident. It's never a coincidence. This could be the day before Kevin McCarthy brings his budget plan and debt ceiling proposal to the floor. Are they trying to capitalize on the energy surrounding that?
Oh, I don't know. I mean, I think that the pressure is more on the president to come out and say that he is going to run. But I'm with Matt. I mean, the burn rate, if you're starting to burn money at a rapid rate when you're doing events,
so he's coming
you're traveling,
to
me, it just feels like too early. Why would you do that? You already have the bully pulpit. He's already the president of the United States. To me, it feels early. However, historically, the president has announced by this time, or will at least make their intentions known.
All right. Well, he's certainly going to make his intentions known, I think, next week with a video. Matt and Lisa sticking with us. Coming up, there's a surprise ending to the historic SpaceX launch. We'll dive into what this means for Musk's aspirations for getting humans to Mars. This is Balance of Power on Bloomberg TV. That was what they called a rapid, unscheduled disassembly of the SpaceX Starship rocket earlier this morning in Texas. Joe, this was a critical launch for Elon Musk. This is how he's planning on bringing humans into space.
Yep. To Mars, to save humanity.
But it didn't go as planned.
Well, it's interesting. If you ask people there, they were not cheering just to make it seem like something didn't happen. The idea was that if this cleared the tower, if it actually got, and it got 4 minutes into the mission, that was the goal here, that anything after clearing the tower was gravy, according to those. And so they cheered to what was apparently an achievement in their eyes. But it was a self-destruct button that they finally
Right. So some level of success, but not obviously what they were planning for. But also,
That's right.
The U.S. Federal Aviation Administration, they're actually looking into this, calling it a flawed launch. So there will be some sort of investigation.
Oh, I mean, it's clearly flawed. This thing blew up. That's not what they were hoping to have happen today. But, look, Elon Musk, he's got enough money to send another one up there. It's just a question of when.
Yes, a few months, I believe. Well, we'll be on the lookout for that. Joining us around the table, Lisa Camusa-Miller, public affairs strategist, and Matt Bennett, Third Way co-founder. What do you guys make of this? Obviously, the U.S. government, I guess, supports this. They want to see space navigation in some respect. But when you see this happen, the FAA now looking into it, doesn't that cause some concern?
Oh, it absolutely causes concern. But this is the way that Musk has handled space and space exploration for many, many years. The fact that this has happened today is not the first. It's not the second. It happens all the time. Billions and billions of dollars are exploding in the air while we're discussing the idea of whether or not we're going to send humans into space. To me, it just is reckless. But Elon Musk is his own PR guy. So
trial and error is part of this, though. Like NASA has its own blooper reel of rockets blowing up over the years. We would never have gotten into orbit. We would never have gone to the moon without them.
Yeah, I think that's right. Space comes with enormous risk and a huge cost. So this probably comes with the territory.
And also, Joe, as you mentioned, Starship, not just bringing people, but also NASA astronauts would be some of those that would go up there.
SpaceX is one of the biggest government contractors out there.
Elon Musk is also making news today because he's taking away everyone's blue checks. Does this enter the political sphere? Because obviously politics is a place. Twitter is a place for politicians, journalists. Are you checking?
Did everyone lose Did you lose your? They're gone. Everyone, no more checks.
Checks are gone. No more checks.
Happy 420.
This is obviously going to be entering politics, though. Obviously, the checks came into place because they wanted to make sure they vetted people and the information they were giving was correct. Now, if you want to check, you just have to buy it. What do you make of it, Lisa?
I mean, I wish I knew. The thing about Musk, to me, is that he continues to evolve and change as a character in the broader scheme of politics, right? He originally did not do news media at all. And over the course of the last couple of weeks, he's done like 4 different interviews. He has just become this person that has really begun to really enjoy and love the idea of it. So the fact that he has now taken away blue checks from all journalists who were once verified, to me, is risky.
Well, it's a little bit of a repair tour, right? He's trying to repair the image following a big drop in ad sales at Twitter and a lot of bad PR here. When we start talking about this, though, I mean, I don't think anyone at this table is going to pay for the blue check. But what happens to government agencies, Matt? What happens to private corporations? We remember when the checks first went away, Eli Lilly had an imposter on there saying they were going to cut the price of insulin to 0. This stuff could happen every day. People could impersonate the president, the Pope, whoever they want.
Yeah, I mean, we've all had a rapid scheduled disassembly of our blue checks.
Well done.
And look, this is, to your point, this could cause real-world harm. There's going to be some funny things that happen with people impersonating others, but there could be some bad things, too. Already, just before we came on air, we were noticing that there's a battle between 2 different Twitter accounts purporting to represent the New York City government.
Wow.
One of them saying, no, you're not the New York City government, we are. So how are people supposed to pick this apart? I mean, in the age of AI and deep fakes, this is just another way for people to not trust anything that they're seeing. I think it is dangerous.
Should he be more concerned now about potential regulation? Because of things like this, people can't even tell who's speaking on behalf of the New York City government?
Yeah, I mean, who knows what makes Elon Musk concerned, but it does appear that there may be a role for Congress or some entity to look at this, because it's going to be the Wild West and it could be a real problem.
Lisa, you were the communications director for the RNC. If you're in a job like that, you've got a decision to make right now. Should agencies like that be paying $8 to be recognized?
Well, I don't necessarily. I think it's a wait and see. Honestly, if I were sitting in that chair today, I would say it's a wait and see. You've got to see what's going to happen because a lot of things could shake out. But it is. It certainly is a validator. But to know that you've paid $8, I mean, who's to say that someone hasn't already paid $8 to own their Twitter account?
I'm afraid to look. Many thanks to Lisa Camusa-Miller and Matt Bennett. Great panel on Balance of Power.
And you can check out more of these stories on our Balance of Power newsletter, on the terminal, and online. Thanks for joining us today. We'll see you tomorrow.
This is Bloomberg.